top is what it's sitting.
You clear line? Awesome.
That's good. So kind of make sure it's hard to see if it shakes a little bit on that rough wood. There you go. All the way out to the edge of the wood.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Chris Chase with the Western Flyer Foundation, and I hope you like some of that opening footage. That was Pete Ross, lead shipwright on the project, and his daughter. She was helping him lay out some of those forward beam shelves last summer, and the footage was just too good. I knew I had to include it in one of the episodes. But in this episode, I want to talk about the woods of the boatyard, all the different species of woods that we use today to rebuild some of these old wood boats. The mahoganies, the cedars, the fir, some of that Purple Heart. Where do we get it, and why do we decide to use it in those locations? And there's no better place to start a story like that than in a classic Northwest forest. It was a forest just like this that built the Flyer in 1937, and it was forests like this that made the Northwest the boat building center of the universe in the 20th century. We had these beautiful, long Douglas fir, Sitka spruce, and cedar trees. The shipwrights flocked here, and this is where the boats were built. But in this episode, let's go to Edensaw Woods, where we buy a lot of this material these days, the tropical hardwoods, some of the softwoods. Let's go to Mahan Log and Lumber, where we get yellow cedars and Douglas firs. And let's check in on the project. They just recently started hanging some of those monstrous SIPO planks that we got for the hull planking. They got a few on, and let's see how they're doing with that. The keel of the Western Flyer, a 65-foot fir 12x12 timber, was laid at what could be argued as the peak of the wooden boat construction in North America. In the mid-1930s, the Pacific Northwest was covered with a virgin forest of lowland Douglas fir, and the shipbuilders used it for virtually everything: the planking, the sawn frames, the deck beams, and the structural backbone timbers that built these boats. I emphasize the word lowland Douglas fir. The trees used in the Northwest shipbuilding industry during the early 20th century grew below 1,500 feet elevation. And because of that, they have a very different characteristics from the high elevation fir we get today. The lower elevation provided a long summer growing season and allowed the trees to get big, up to 8 feet in diameter and several hundred feet tall. I want to kind of show an example of what I'm talking about. In my left hand is a piece of original hull planking from the Flyer, and it's that lowland coastal Douglas fir. And it's about 12 to maybe 18 rings per inch. And in my right hand is a piece of high elevation, slow growing Douglas fir. Exact same tree, but totally different characteristics. It's almost 30 to 40 rings per inch. It's that wide separation from summer to winter wood that makes Douglas fir rot resistant and structurally sound. The Douglas fir tree begins to reach its harvestable age, that is for boat lumber, at about 150 years old. With the oldest second growth forest in the Northwest now just reaching 130 to 140 years of age, we're a few years off from a consistent supply of quality boat lumber. That's why we started to use Purple Heart as some of the structural backbone timbers in these larger ship repairs. It was in the late 80s, early 90s, that Purple Heart became the structural boat lumber of choice here in the Northwest, or for that matter, all across North America. Purple Heart is a tropical hardwood that grows throughout Central America and across northern South America. Purple Heart has really become an industry standard. It's still the go-to wood for stem repairs and backbone repairs, but now you see it used for floor timbers, deck beams, house sills, that beautiful stacked stern that was built on the Flyer, or any place where durability and rot resistancy are a must. And I'm sure there's a question on your mind, how much do we pay for Purple Heart? We get our Purple Heart from Edensaw Woods. They usually have a pretty good supply available, and we pay anywhere from $8 to $9 a board foot. But remember, I buy a lot of wood every year, so the street retail price is probably something different, but it's still definitely worth it.
6x9 on each side of it, and then
Even with the majority of the Northwest forest a few years away from producing that high-quality boat lumber we're looking for, there are a few exceptions. I would guess that in almost every forest community, there's someone running a small wood milling operation. Here in the Northwest, we have Mahan Log and Lumber. Paul Mahan is a third-generation logger. His operation is big enough to produce quantities of lumber, but small enough to actually work with each customer individually so they get exactly what they want. With our guidance, he was able to source some really nice second-growth Douglas fir and red cedar trees. Maybe not enough to build the entire Western Flyer, but certainly enough for those sawn frames in the stern and a lot of the deck beams. With the Flyer originally built out of Douglas fir, we tried hard to incorporate some of it into this rebuild. Mahan Lumber was also able to supply all of the 2-inch yellow cedar that was used on the inner hull planking or the ceiling. And they also milled the 4-inch stock that will ultimately be milled down and used to build the forward bulwarks on the Flyer. Known commonly as Alaskan yellow cedar, it does grow outside of the state of Alaska. The logs we had milled came off of Stevens Pass here in the North Cascades. Known for its strength-to-weight ratio and its superior rot resistancy, it's a perfect substitute for the original Douglas fir.
Yeah, I'd be pushing it. You probably could get 2 out of that.
The list of potential substitutes for the original 2-inch Douglas fir hull planking was pretty short. Yellow cedar, Sipo, Sapele, and maybe Douglas fir if we could find enough. In the end, the answer was quite easy. I had never really thought we'd find that much lowland Douglas fir to plank the whole Western Flyer, so I struck it off the list pretty quickly. That left the Alaskan yellow cedar and 2 types of African mahogany, Sipo and Sapele. To get that much Alaskan yellow cedar, we would have to come from northern British Columbia and most likely harvested out of trees that were 600 to 800 years old. The African mahoganies also have a long road to travel. It's mainly harvested throughout Central Africa. But in stepped the owner of Edensaw Woods, Jim Ferris. He had located several logs still on the ground in Africa that had been stamped FSC. FSC stands for the Forest Steward Council, and it's an independent organization working worldwide to promote sustainable harvest of our forest resources. If a log meets their rigorous standard for good forest stewardship, it can be stamped with that FSC. That made the choice pretty darn easy. FSC certified Sipo, over 800-year-old yellow cedar. It also met all of our requirements. It was available, came in long lengths and wide widths. It was rot resistant and extremely tough. In the end, we ended up buying several logs out of Africa. We had it custom milled to 2 3/8 of an inch thick, and the boards were 29 to 39 feet long and up to 60 inches wide.
There's a mill right by your noggin.
That way you know what it is. Ryan, I was thinking if you could get just the bottle, we could stick it up against the garber and push it out. Might need to come up further.
Be impossible to tell the story of the wood boat industry here in Port Townsend without a stop at Edensaw Woods. It was started in 1984 by two graduates of the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building, and they really hit a home run with this one. They've been selling high-quality boat lumber to the local shipyards, and that, for that matter, North American-wide, for over 30 years. There's hardly a place I can think of in the North America that you could buy a piece of 2-inch by 50-inch by 40-foot piece of sapele on a consistent basis. This is probably the perfect place to end an episode like this. Standing in front of a pile of fresh-cut Alaskan yellow cedar. This wood behind me, sometime later this spring or early summer, will be dressed down to 4 inches, and it'll be cut out or sawn to shape to create those forward bulwarks on the Western Flyer. But anyway, thanks again for watching the videos, and thanks for tuning in and making comments on all the videos. I sure enjoy making the videos and sharing the project with everybody. And I'll make sure to put links to all the players involved, the Western Flyer Foundation, the Shipwrights Co-op, and Edensaw Woods, in the description box below. And until next time, thanks again for tuning in.